Well, Americans have a very unusual seafood diet relative to what we catch here. More than 85% of the seafood that we eat is imported. And that seafood actually is very reflective of the world rather than the ocean next door. So top five, number one is shrimp, by far and away the most popular seafood. 90% of our shrimp is coming from abroad. Number two is canned tuna. And again, that actually comes to us as a result of General MacArthur, because when MacArthur was provisional governor of Japan, he allowed the Japanese to rebuild their distant water fleet, and they went after tuna, and they started selling to canneries in the West because they needed the hard currency. So that's how we ended up with canned tuna as number two. Number three is salmon, and you would think that that should be American, but in fact, actually, we export 80% of the salmon that we catch. And the salmon we actually eat is imported farmed. So we export the wild stuff from Alaska, and we import largely farmed salmon usually from Chile. And anyone who's a marine biologist knows that there are no salmonids native to the southern hemisphere. So, and then there's another funny thing to the salmon, because a certain portion of the salmon that we catch in Alaska, we freeze it, we send it to Alaska, they defrost it, bone it, refreeze it, and send it back to us double frozen. So that's number three. Number four is Alaska pollock, which you would think, that's a nice American fish, but again, 600 million pounds of it exported. In the other direction, the white fish that replace all that pollock that we send abroad, number five is tilapia, which is almost entirely from China. We import so much seafood primarily because it's cheap. Americans are not great appreciators of fish. Even though we're a big country and we actually have a big seafood footprint, on a per capita basis, the average American eats only about 15 pounds of seafood per person per year. And if you compare that, say, to China or Japan or Korea, where they're eating 30, 40 pounds of seafood a year, you right away see that we are not great discriminators of good seafood. And so for us, there was somebody in the seafood business who once said to me that for Americans, seafood is basically a dough delivery system. So we'd much rather have something flavorless that we could fry, and so it's cheap. We export a lot of seafood, and we do. We export about 3 billion pounds of seafood per year. We export that a lot, again, because of price. We're getting very good prices for things like black cod, things like monkfish, things like wild salmon. These are all products that attract great attention particularly from Asia. They want that fish, and we don't seem to want to pay for it. My number one most I think sustainable choice is farmed filter feeders. When I say that, I mean mussels, oysters, clams, and even edible kelp and seaweed. These things, we in this country, we have a nitrogen problem in our coastal waterways. Because we're putting so much human waste into the water, even if it's treated, we're still putting a lot of nitrogen in. There's a lot of fertilizer runoff. Well, all that causes algal blooms. And if those algae die, they get consumed by bacteria. That sucks oxygen out of the water, and you get dead zones. Well, shellfish, farm shellfish, take a lot of that phytoplankton, a lot of that microalgae out of the water. So it's kind of a win-win situation. We get nitrogen out of the water, and we also get a very nice, clean seafood product. Beyond that, I think there's also a really interesting thing in Southern California and all over California in the sardine, anchovy, herring, and squid catch. With sardines and anchovies, a lot of that ends up as bait or feed. We could just be eating it directly. It's high in omega-3s, low in toxins, a great fish, a couple of fish to eat. Squid too, market squid, a lot of our market squid gets sold abroad. We could be eating more of that ourselves. So I think here in California, we've got a wealth of riches, and you should enjoy it and try to eat as Californian as you can.